Welcome to Story Corner, the story of Adolf Hitler. Chapter 1, Origins, Childhood, and Early Influences, 1889-1907. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in the small Austrian village of Braunau am Inn, a border town separated from Germany only by a narrow river. His birthplace, today marked by a commemorative stone against fascism, was at the time an unremarkable building in a provincial setting, but its occupant would become synonymous with the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century. Understanding Hitler's childhood and formative influences has long been a central question for biographers, psychologists, and historians seeking to understand how an obscure Austrian boy could become the architect of genocide and global war. Hitler's father, Adolf Hitler, was a stern, often overbearing customs official. Born illegitimate as Adolf Hitler, he changed his surname only shortly before Adolf was born, adopting the name Hitler, which itself had several regional variations, such as Hiedler or Huitler. Adolf was self-made, socially ambitious, and emotionally distant. His rigid discipline, fondness for order, and authoritarian temperament left deep impressions on his children. His mother, Clara Perlzel, in contrast, was gentle, patient, and wholly devoted to her children. Adolf, the second of her 4 surviving children, was strongly attached to her and carried her memory with him throughout his life. The young Adolf was a restless and often solitary child. He demonstrated an early interest in drawing, painting, and architecture, interests that would later shape his aspirations and, indirectly, his political ambitions. While he did reasonably well in primary school, his academic performance declined sharply. In middle school, he came into conflict with teachers and developed a reputation for stubbornness and rebelliousness. At age 11, he was deeply impacted by the death of his younger brother Edmund, which further isolated him, intensified his introversion, and darkened his disposition. The relationship between Adolf and Adolf grew increasingly strained. Hitler resisted his father's desire that he pursue a career in the civil service. Instead, he dreamed of becoming an artist. Their clashes were frequent and heated. Adolf's sudden death in 1903 freed Hitler from paternal pressure, but it also left him without direction. After temporarily improving in school, he eventually dropped out in 1905 with no diploma, no job training, and no prospects, only vague dreams of artistic success. During these years, Hitler developed the first seeds of ideological attitudes that would later harden into dogma. In Linz, where he spent his adolescence, he was exposed to the pan-German nationalism that permeated the region, positioning ethnic Germans as culturally superior and advocating unification with the German Reich. He also encountered the rising wave of Völkisch thought a racist, romantic nationalism obsessed with purity, mythology, and anti-Semitism, although historians debate how deeply Hitler absorbed these ideas during his youth. His later recollections in Mein Kampf, often self-serving and exaggerated, claimed he experienced an ideological awakening in these years. Clara Hitler's illness in 1907, diagnosed as breast cancer, devastated Adolf. He tended to her in her final months, and her death in December 1907 left him emotionally shattered. The compassionate Jewish doctor who treated her, Eduard Bloch, would later recall Hitler's sincere grief and respectful behavior, noting the irony of his later hatred. Hitler remained directionless, but clung to the dream of becoming an artist, convinced that Vienna was the stage on which his talent would shine. Chapter 2: Vienna. Poverty, Radicalization, and Failure, 1907-1913. In late 1907, Hitler left for Vienna with high hopes of gaining admission to the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts Vienna. He presented several drawings for the entrance examination, focusing on architecture and urban scenes. The examiners rejected him, noting his talent for draftsmanship, but judging his human figure drawings inadequate. Devastated, but convinced the rejection was a mistake, he attempted the exam again the following year, this time failing even the preliminary selection. Rather than return home, Hitler lingered in Vienna. His savings dwindled, and he gradually descended into poverty. By 1909, he was living in shelters and working odd jobs, selling postcards he painted. The once ambitious young man became increasingly isolated, resentful, and embittered. Yet this period proved ideologically formative. Vienna, a multinational imperial capital filled with competing political movements, exposed Hitler to a cauldron of ideas. He read voraciously newspapers, pamphlets, political writings, art magazines, and philosophical works. He admired the architecture of the city, especially the monumental works of Otto Wagner and the imperial Ringstrasse, but scorned modernism and avant-garde trends. More significantly, he became a devoted reader of pan-German nationalist publications, absorbing their anti-Habsburg, anti-Marxist, and anti-Semitic rhetoric. Historians debate the degree to which Hitler became a committed anti-Semite in Vienna. His own account in Mein Kampf claims an ideological transformation, a sudden moment of revelation. After observing what he perceived as racial differences, yet contemporary evidence indicates a more gradual shift, influenced by the prevalent ideologies of the time. Vienna was home to virulent political anti-Semitism, expressed by figures such as Karl Luder, the populist mayor, whose blend of nationalism and Jew-baiting deeply impressed Hitler. The city also hosted racial theorists such as Georg von Schirnerer, whose radical German nationalism and anti-Jewish platform prefigured Nazi ideology. Hitler's Viennese years also shaped his views on class conflict, Marxism, and mass politics. He despised the multicultural character of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, viewing Slavs and other minorities as inferior. He saw Viennese social democrats organizing the working class and feared their populist power, even as he absorbed lessons from their methods of propaganda and mass mobilization. Meanwhile, his personal life remained unstable. He formed no close friendships. His relations with women were distant, awkward, and largely unreciprocated. Infatuations were conducted from afar without direct engagement. These failures reinforced his retreat into an interior world of resentment and grandiosity. By 1913, threatened with arrest for failing to register for military service and weary of life in Vienna, Hitler left for Munich, hoping to immerse himself in what he saw as a purer, more authentically German environment. He carried with him sharpened ideological beliefs, artistic ambitions largely abandoned, and a growing sense of grievance against the society he believed had betrayed his talent. Chapter 3: Munich, the Great War, and the Birth of a Fanatic, 1913. 1919. Hitler arrived in Munich in May 1913, blending into the Bavarian capital's bohemian and artistic community. He supported himself by painting postcards and architectural scenes, establishing a modest routine. Munich felt culturally and politically aligned with his nationalism. He felt more at home than he ever had in Austria. The outbreak of World War I in August 1914 transformed his life, while many Austrians living in Germany were deported or viewed with suspicion. Hitler successfully petitioned to enlist in a Bavarian regiment, claiming German identity. He served as a messenger for the 16th Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment, spending much of the war on the Western Front. Hitler proved a dependable soldier. Although not a frontline combatant, he was frequently exposed to danger. The war radicalized Hitler further. He viewed Germany's struggle as a world historical battle for survival and racial supremacy. The camaraderie of the trenches provided him a sense of belonging he had lacked throughout his life. Decorated for bravery, wounded twice, and temporarily blinded by a gas attack in 1918, Hitler ended the war in a military hospital convalescing, just as Germany capitulated. The armistice and the collapse of the German Empire in November 1918 struck Hitler as a moral catastrophe. News of Germany's defeat reached him just as he was recovering from gas-induced blindness. He described the moment as a shattering revelation, blaming Jews, Marxists, and civilian politicians for what he perceived as treachery rather than a legitimate military collapse. the stab-in-the-back myth. A conspiracy theory claiming Germany had been betrayed from within became a central tenet of his worldview. After the war, Hitler remained in the army as a political officer tasked with attending courses on political ideology and monitoring extremist groups. His superiors noted his oratory skills and ideological fervor, assigning him to lecture soldiers on the dangers of Marxism. His talent for speaking in public first emerged here. He discovered an ability to sway audiences with impassioned theatrical rhetoric. In September 1919, Hitler was ordered to investigate a small nationalist group, the German Workers' Party, DEP. During the meeting, he engaged in a heated debate and impressed the group's founder, Anton Drexler, who urged him to join. Hitler accepted, beginning the political career that would change history. Chapter 4: The Rise of the Nazi Party, 1919-1933. The German Workers' Party soon rebranded itself as the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP. The Nazi Party. Hitler rapidly emerged as its most dynamic member. His charisma, organizational skill, and ability to channel anger into political momentum transformed a fringe group into a growing movement. Hitler developed the Nazi emblem, the swastika, in a white circle on a red background, and shaped the party's propaganda, emphasizing nationalism, anti-Semitism, anti-Marxism, and authoritarian leadership. He founded a paramilitary wing, the SA Sturmabteilung, to intimidate opponents and protect party meetings. Under his influence, party rallies became theatrical events featuring banners, music, uniforms, and coordinated chants designed to evoke emotion and unity. The political chaos of the Weimar Republic provided fertile ground. Germany was plagued by hyperinflation, political assassinations, failed uprisings, and resentment toward the Treaty of Versailles, which imposed territorial losses, disarmament, and reparations. Many Germans sought strong leadership, national renewal, and scapegoats for their suffering. Hitler offered all three. His first major attempt to seize power, the Beer Hall Putsch of November 1923, was a fiasco. Inspired by Mussolini's march on Rome, Hitler sought to overthrow the Bavarian government in Munich as a prelude to marching on Berlin. Yet the plot collapsed when police confronted the marchers, killing 16 Nazis and arresting Hitler. His trial became a national spectacle. Hitler used the courtroom as a stage, delivering speeches that framed him as a patriotic visionary, persecuted by a weak and treasonous government. The judges treated him leniently, sentencing him to just 5 years, of which he served less than 9 months in comfortable conditions. During his imprisonment, Hitler dictated the first volume of Mein Kampf, My Struggle, outlining his ideology, racial hierarchy, Aryan supremacy, anti-Semitism, Lebensraum, expansion eastward, militarism, and the necessity of a single, strong leader, the Führerprinzip. The book sold modestly at first, but became the Bible of the Nazi movement. After his release in 1924, Hitler pursued power legally. The Nazi Party rebuilt its organization, expanded its propaganda machine, and capitalized on economic distress, especially the Great Depression beginning in 1929. Millions of unemployed workers, disillusioned middle-class citizens, and embittered veterans flocked to extremist parties. By presenting himself as a savior who alone could restore Germany, Hitler tapped into profound social fears. The Nazis exploited parliamentary dysfunction, staging mass rallies, and using slogans that promised national revival while demonizing Jews, communists, and political rivals. By 1932, the Nazis became the largest party in the Reichstag, though not a majority. Political elites underestimated Hitler, believing they could control him. By offering him the chancellorship in January 1933, it was a fatal miscalculation. Chapter 5: Dictatorship, Totalitarian Power, and the Road to War, 1933-1939. Once appointed Chancellor of Germany, on January 30th, 1933, Hitler moved swiftly to dismantle democracy. The Reichstag fire in February provided a pretext to suspend civil liberties. Under the Reichstag fire decree, communists were arrested, opposition newspapers shut down, and political enemies intimidated. The Enabling Act of March 1933 granted Hitler the authority to enact laws without parliamentary approval, effectively ending the Weimar Republic. Soon after, trade unions were dissolved, rival political parties banned, and all institutions brought under Nazi control in a process known as Gleichschaltung, coordination. Hitler consolidated power further in 1934 during the Night of the Long Knives, in which he ordered the execution of SA leaders, most notably Ernst Röhm, along with other political opponents. This secured the loyalty of the army and eliminated challenges to his authority. When President Paul von Hindenburg died in August 1934, Hitler merged the presidency with the chancellorship, taking the title Führer and commanding absolute power. A totalitarian state emerged. The Gestapo, secret police, the SS under Heinrich Himmler, and a sprawling surveillance network ensured compliance. Propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels orchestrated a cultural revolution that promoted Nazi ideology, censored dissent, and indoctrinated youth. Architecture, art, music, film, and education were reshaped to serve the regime. Central to Nazi ideology was racial policy. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935 stripped Jews of citizenship and imposed harsh restrictions. Jews were banned from professions, schools, and public life. Anti-Jewish violence escalated dramatically during the Kristallnacht pogrom of November 1938, in which synagogues were burned, Jewish shops destroyed, and thousands arrested. Meanwhile, Hitler pursued aggressive foreign policy aimed at overturning the Treaty of Versailles and expanding German territory. He withdrew Germany from the League of Nations, reintroduced conscription, and reoccupied the Rhineland in 1936. Each action met with feeble international resistance. In 1938, he annexed Austria in the Anschluss without opposition, and then turned to Czechoslovakia, securing the Sudetenland under the Munich Agreement, and later occupying the entire country. Hitler's ambitions grew. He believed Germany needed vast territorial expansion, Lebensraum, particularly in Eastern Europe. He signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with the Soviet Union in August 1939, securing a temporary alliance and secretly dividing Eastern Europe between the two powers. With diplomatic obstacles removed, Hitler prepared for war. Chapter 6, World War II and the Machinery of Destruction, 1939-1945. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, prompting Britain and France to declare war. World War II had begun. Hitler's early military successes were astonishing, using blitzkrieg tactics, rapid, coordinated strikes, combining infantry, tanks, and air power. Germany conquered Poland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France within months. By mid-1941, Hitler dominated most of Europe, standing at the height of his power. Yet beneath the military triumphs lay horrific atrocities. The SS Einsatzgruppen followed the army into conquered territories, massacring Jews, political leaders, and perceived enemies. Anti-Jewish laws intensified, ghettos were established, and deportations began. Hitler's obsession with racial purification had fused with imperial conquest. In June 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, believing it would be a swift victory, granting Germany the resources and land it sought. It proved catastrophic. Despite early successes, Germany underestimated Soviet resilience, geography, and winter. The invasion radicalized Nazi policy further. Mass shootings escalated into systematic genocide. By 1942, Hitler authorized the final solution, the industrialized extermination of Europe's Jews. Death camps such as Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor became the epicenters of genocide. Millions of Jews, along with Roma, disabled individuals, political prisoners, Soviet POWs, and others deemed undesirable, were murdered. Hitler rarely issued explicit written orders, but was the unquestioned architect of the genocidal vision that permeated the regime. Hitler's military decisions became increasingly erratic. He overruled generals, demanded impossible offensives, and refused strategic retreats. The turning point came at the Battle of Stalingrad, 1942-43, where the German Sixth Army was encircled and destroyed. Subsequent defeats in North Africa, Italy, and on the Eastern Front further eroded German power. The D-Day invasion in June 1944 opened a Western front, trapping Germany between advancing Allied armies. After the failed July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler, he grew more paranoid, unleashing brutal reprisals. The war became a nihilistic struggle, with Hitler ordering scorched earth policies that devastated German infrastructure and civilian life. By early 1945, the Third Reich was collapsing. The Soviets closed in on Berlin from the east, while Western forces approached from the west. Hitler retreated to the Führerbunker, an underground shelter beneath the Reich Chancellery. Emaciated, increasingly delusional, and plagued by trembling limbs, likely symptoms of Parkinson's disease, he dictated final proclamations blaming Jews, generals, and the German people for the war's failure. On April 29, 1945, he married Eva Braun, his longtime companion. The next day, with Soviet troops only blocks away, Hitler and Braun committed suicide. Hitler with a gunshot to the head, Braun with poison. Their bodies were burned on Hitler's orders. Within a week, Germany surrendered. Chapter 7: Legacy, Memory, and Historical Interpretation. The legacy of Adolf Hitler is unparalleled in its destructive magnitude. He presided over the most extensive genocide in history, triggered a world war that killed tens of millions and left Europe devastated. His name is universally associated with evil, tyranny, and mass murder. Yet the study of Hitler remains a vast scholarly field, driven by questions about his psychology, charisma, ideology, and the social conditions that enabled his rise. Historians have debated his personality extensively. Some emphasize his opportunism and ability to manipulate events. Others highlight his ideological rigidity and genuine belief in racial supremacy. Psychological analyses portray him as a mix of narcissism, sociopathic traits, and delusional grandiosity, yet none reduce him to a mere madman. His methods were calculated and politically effective within the context of a fragile, humiliated Germany. Hitler's regime revealed how modern technology and bureaucracy could be weaponized to commit atrocities on an unprecedented scale. The Holocaust remains the central moral warning of the 20th century, demonstrating the lethal consequences of racist ideology, authoritarianism, and dehumanization. In the decades since his death, Hitler has been the subject of countless books, documentaries, films, and academic studies. Nations have grappled with his memory differently. Germany has confronted it with remorse and education, while other countries use it as a reference point for discussions on human rights and political extremism. Despite the enormity of historical literature, one truth stands above all others. Hitler was not an aberration created in isolation. He emerged from real social, economic, and political conditions that, in different forms, can reappear. His rise underscores the fragility of democracies, the dangers of scapegoating minorities, and the power of propaganda and charismatic authoritarianism. Understanding Hitler is not about fascination, but vigilance. His life is a cautionary narrative illustrating the darkest potentials within modern civilization. If the 20th century has a central moral lesson, it is that the atrocities of the Third Reich must never be forgotten, minimized, or repeated.